You know, I've really been thinking lately about the word pivot.
Oh, yeah. It's
Yep.
everywhere right now.
Right, like in the startup world or even just watching basketball, it's this really sexy word. It implies agility,
Yeah.
you know?
Agile, nimble, all those buzzwords.
Exactly. You see a blocked path and you plant your foot and you just swing in a new direction. It's very calculated, strategic.
Mm-hmm.
But the key is you're the one holding the ball.
Right. You are the one making the choice.
Yeah. But what happens when you don't have the ball? What happens when you're not the one making the move, but you're actually the one getting tackled?
See, that is a completely different game. That is not a strategy. That's a collision.
And that collision is exactly what we're getting into today. Welcome to the deep dive. We are jumping into some really powerful source material today, a book called When Life Forces You to Pivot, a reset guide for starting again by Tashi R. Jones.
And right off the bat, we should tell you, if you're listening, expecting a standard, rah-rah, just pull yourself up by your bootstraps kind of guide.
Yeah, this is not that.
Right.
Not at all.
No. This is a field report from a year that, frankly, would have broken most people. Jones distinguishes right away between what we were just talking about, a calculated change like deciding to go back to school, and a forced pivot.
Because a forced pivot is when the universe or your employer or your partner decides that your before is just dead and the after hasn't even been sketched out yet.
Exactly. The script is gone.
And for Tashi Jones, the author, this wasn't some slow burn realization. It was an absolute avalanche. We're looking at the year 2025 in her life. She calls it the triple whammy. And looking at her timeline, it genuinely felt like reading a script for a tragedy, but this is her real life.
It's what psychologists refer to as cumulative stress. It's not just that one bad event happens. It's the total lack of recovery time between multiple bad events.
Right, so it starts in March 2025. She's a mom, and her son is her daily rhythm. But then he leaves for the Air Force.
Right, so that is a massive shift. The empty nest, suddenly you have that silence in the hallway, the loss of that active daily mom role.
Yeah. And then almost immediately, between May and August, the floor drops out of her personal life, too. She goes through the dissolution of an 8-year relationship. The engagement ends.
Which is huge. So
Yeah.
now she's lost the role of mother in that hands-on sense and the future identity of wife.
And what's wild is she's still standing at this point. She's still going to work, still holding it together. And then comes Halloween.
October 31st?
Yeah, 3:15 p.m. She is a delivery leader at a major corporation. And for you guys listening who aren't in the corporate world, a delivery leader is basically the person who makes sure things actually get done. They're the glue.
The organizer, the one holding the structure up.
Right. And she gets a video call.
A 10-minute video call.
10 minutes. 10 minutes to just delete an entire career.
And that right there completes the triple whammy. No kid to parent actively, no partner to love, and suddenly no job to do. It creates a total vacuum. It's incredible. And the framework she builds out of this wreckage is what our mission is today. We really want to understand her concept of the pivot, the pause, and the reset. Because we want to figure out how you move from just performing strengths to actually recalibrating yourself internally.
But before we get to the fixing, we have to talk about the breaking. Because the immediate aftermath is so crucial to understand.
Yeah, the way she describes that layoff call, I mean, she didn't flip a table, she didn't scream at her boss. She talks about this concept of the silent cry.
Oh, that image is just haunting. She describes sitting in a room that felt like it had no doors and no windows, just trapped. And she opens her mouth to scream against the unfairness of everything, losing the airman, the partner, the paycheck, but no sound actually comes out.
Is that a real physiological thing, the silent scream?
It absolutely is. It's shock. When trauma is that multifaceted, when it's financial and emotional and relational all at once, the brain literally jams. It can't prioritize what to warn first. Do I cry over the paycheck or the marriage or my son leaving? The system just overloads and freezes. Wow. But here's the part that I think is so relatable, because she didn't stay frozen for long. She immediately went into hyperdrive. She calls it performing strength. And I feel like this is a specific trap for anyone listening who identifies as the strong friend.
Oh, definitely. The strong friend trap is so real. If you are the person everyone always calls to fix their problems, you literally don't know how to take off the armor. You start to think that if you stop moving, you stop mattering.
Yeah, if to keep producing.
Right. And Tasha writes about this so vividly. After the breakup, she didn't just curl up in a ball and cry. She hit the gym. hard.
Ah, the classic revenge body.
Precisely. And on the surface, society completely applauds this behavior. People were probably telling her, wow, the snapback is real, you look amazing.
But she wasn't doing it for her health.
No, not at all. She calls it cannibalizing her own reserves. She openly admits she was working out specifically to make her ex regret leaving. It was fueled by spite, not wellness. She writes that her waist was shrinking, but her eyes were completely hollow. She calls this trauma in a tuxedo.
Trauma in a tuxedo. That is such a heavy phrase. I love that.
It's brilliant. We dress up our avoidance and productivity. If I'm getting super fit, or if I'm launching a side hustle, or just staying incredibly busy, I don't have to feel the pain.
But the body keeps the score. You can't outrun your own nervous system forever.
You really can't.
Which brings us to September 3rd, 2025. This is the moment where the forced pivot becomes literal metal on metal. The car crash.
Yeah, she's driving her SUV, which she named Ebony, and she has her dogs in the car. A hyperactive Maltipoo and a nervous pit bull.
A chaotic combo.
Very. So it's chaotic inside the vehicle, but it is way more chaotic inside her head. She's distracted, she's stressed, she's trying to manage these dogs.
And she drives straight into a utility pole.
Snaps it right in half, totals the car.
And thankfully she walks away, physically okay. But standing there, seeing the airbag deployed and looking at the wreckage, she has this profound realization.
When you don't pause yourself, life pauses you. That is the absolute crux of the first section of her guide. She had been running on fumes, operating under this grand illusion that she was handling the triple whammy. But the crash was the universe slamming the brakes because she refused to take her foot off the gas.
You know, there's another scene she shares that illustrates this internal disconnection so well even before the crash happens. The grocery store scene.
Oh, the pasta trance.
Yes, the pasta trance. She describes just standing in the aisle, staring at boxes of pasta for way longer than anyone ever needs to look at pasta.
That is what psychologists call shock lag. Her body is in the grocery store, physically present in the aisle. But her nervous system, it is still back on that 10-minute video call. It's still back in the living room arguing with her ex. The brain simply hasn't caught up to the body's physical location.
It's basically a form of dissociation.
Exactly. She was performing strength looking functional enough to go buy groceries, but her internal processing speed had dropped to absolute zero.
So now the car is totaled. The job is gone. The house is empty. She literally cannot run anymore. She is forced to enter what she calls the pause. And in the book, she identifies the main enemy of the pause as silence.
Which makes sense because silence is terrifying when you've used noise and busyness to define your worth. For Tashia, the silence of the empty nest wasn't just about the house being quiet, it was the loss of an audience.
Now an audience. That sounds almost a little narcissistic at first glance, but reading her work, I really don't think that's how she means
No,
it.
not at all. It's about service. Her identity was tied up in performative service. She was a delivery leader and she was a mom. She performed care for her son. She performed leadership and organization for her company. Without someone to cook for, without a team to lead, who is she performing for?
Right. She mentions missing the rollover good mornings. That detail really hit me hard. It's those tiny micro interactions that validate that you exist in a shared space with someone.
And when those are stripped away, you are left with this stark realization of what she calls rented land. And this is a massive business concept that she brilliantly applies to her personal life.
This was my absolute biggest aha moment from the source material. Rented land. Break that down for us because everyone needs to hear this.
Okay, so she realized she had been pouring all her genius, her best energy, her late nights into building this beautiful mansion on land she did not own. The corporation, she was a tenant, a fantastic tenant, maybe the best tenant they had, but still just a tenant.
And when the landlord, meaning the company, decided to take the land back via that layoff, she was metaphorically homeless.
Exactly. Meanwhile, she actually had her own business. Stronger than before creative services.
She owned that land.
She owned it free and clear, but she had left it sitting there as a vacant lot, totally neglected while she spent all her time landscaping someone else's property. It is such a cautionary tale for every corporate employee listening to this. You can build incredible things at your job, but you can never forget whose name is on the deed to the land.
Man, that is so true. So this pause forced her to stop building on rented land, but it also forced a massive shift in her spiritual life. The book has a really strong faith component, but it doesn't feel preachy at all. It feels very raw. She talks about moving from mountain-moving prayers to mustard seed faith.
I love this distinction so much. Before the crash, her faith was loud. It was very declarative. I claim victory. I am a conqueror, which if you think about it, was just another form of performance.
Performing for God, basically.
Right. But in that dark room, in the silence of the pause, she just didn't have the energy for the show anymore.
She realized she didn't need to shout to be heard.
She realized that a whispered help was just as valid as a shout of victory. Mustard seed faith is small, it's quiet, but it's real. It was about being present in the wreckage rather than trying to pretend the house wasn't burning down. She finally gave herself permission to not be okay.
And so she sits in that wreckage. She accepts the silence. She reconnects with this quieter, more honest faith. And that brings us to the reset. And there is a scene in this section of the book that feels like it belongs in a movie. The pawn shop.
Oh, it is the pivotal scene of the whole narrative.
She takes her engagement ring, this huge symbol of 8 years of her life, and she walks into a pawn shop. And her description is so sensory. The fluorescent lights, the metallic smell of the place, it's completely unromantic and cold.
It's purely transactional, and that is exactly the point. She walks out of there with $1,487 in cash.
Which, let's be honest, seems pretty low for 8 years of your life.
If you're only looking at it as a financial transaction, sure. But she writes that it was never about the cash, it was about the release. She wasn't just selling a diamond, she was selling the Mrs. title that never actually happened. She was liquidating all the effort she spent trying to shrink herself to fit into a relationship.
Shrinking herself. She uses the phrase walking on eggshells.
Yes. She realized she had been eroding her own edges just to keep the peace. She had made herself smaller so the relationship could feel bigger. And the reset was all about establishing a new metric for her life. The goal wasn't success or status or marriage anymore. It was peace.
She says her new question for literally every decision is, does this cost me my peace? And if the answer is yes, the price is just too high.
And living that way requires learning that no is a complete sentence, which is incredibly hard for a recovering strong friend. You feel guilty saying no to people, but she realized that saying yes to everyone else was basically saying no to her own peace.
So we've pivoted, we've paused, we've reset our core values. Now comes the part that I think scares everyone the most, the restart. Because let's look at her reality. She's in her 40s, she's single, she's unemployed. The world tells you that in that situation, you are starting over from scratch.
And she rejects that framing entirely. This is the core message for you listening right now. You are not starting from zero. You are starting from experience.
I love that shift in perspective. But practically speaking, how does that actually work? Because experience sounds nice, but it doesn't pay the electric bill.
Well, she conducted what she calls a skills audit. This is where she put her delivery leader hat back on, but this time she wore it for herself. She looked at her resume and realized she didn't lose her skills when she had to hand in her corporate ID badge. She still knows operational management. She knows crisis handling. She knows how to mobilize people.
She just needed to transfer those assets off the rented land of the corporation and onto her own brand.
Precisely. She stopped looking for a job to define her and started looking at how her existing skills could define a business. But she also gives a really great warning against the 50-page panic.
Oh, I totally do this. When I want to start something new, I feel like I need this massive master plan. I need to know exactly where I'll be in 5 years before I can even take the first step.
And that kind of paralysis is exactly what keeps you stuck. Tashi advises focusing only on the next right step. Her restart wasn't some massive global launch on day one. It was simple things. Get dressed today, treat your business like a real 9-to-5, go outside and get some fresh air, keep the small promises you make to yourself.
And the other big piece of her restart was finding support in really unexpected places. This surprised me. She didn't just lean heavily on her old local circle, she went digital.
This is such a great example of how a forced pivot can open new doors. She actually found a walking partner on TikTok. They would go for walks together virtually, and she built a strong professional connection with a group all the way in Nigeria called MDE Empire Promotions.
That is a huge leap, going from a local corporate office to a connection in Lagos.
It really highlights that when the old doors close, even the ones that are slammed in your face, the new ones might be on a completely different continent. If she had stayed safely in her delivery leader box on that rented land, she never would have found that global community. She never would have realized her reach could extend that far.
Which really circles back to her idea that the pivot was actually a rescue mission.
That is the ultimate reframe. She suggests that the triple whammy, as incredibly painful as it was essentially a rescue operation. Life forced her to stop because she never would have quit that job or left that relationship on her own. She was too loyal, she was too strong, she would have stayed on rented land forever.
So the disaster was actually a detour to exactly where she was supposed to be.
It changes the fundamental question from why is this happening to me to what is this trying to save me from or where is this trying to move me?
That is such a powerful perspective shift. I mean, it doesn't magically take away the pain of the transition, but it gives the pain a purpose.
Exactly. It completely validates the suffering while also promising that there is a destination ahead.
I want to leave everyone listening with a challenge based on Tashi's identity inventory. We talked earlier about stripping away all the titles.
Mm.
It's a scary exercise, but I think it's necessary.
It's the room with no doors test.
Right, so here is the question for you listening right now. If you lost your job title today, if you lost your relationship status, if you weren't mom or dad or boss or provider, who would be left standing in that quiet room?
And if you don't know the answer to that, you might be building your life on rented land.
So true. And if you are in that room right now, if you are in the middle of your own triple whammy, please remember Tasha's advice. The silence is not the enemy. It's a tool. Take the pause. You are not starting from zero.
You're starting from experience.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us. We'll catch you next time.